All right, Jason, let's get real for a second. So
Yes.
we've talked about misconceptions of divorce. We've talked about the process of divorce. But let's talk about the realness of divorce, right?
Right.
So you've got people, these are people, two people that are coming together. They've built a life together, and now they're having to separate that life. And so, can you talk about kind of like at you like when someone comes to you, like what is that experience typically like? Like,
Right.
what do you see in your clients or in the people that you talk to?
So I think what makes family law. So every case in law in general is case specific, fact specific. Every case brings its own set of facts.
Sure.
Um, the way the Maine statutes kind of approaches things is they do kind of go by timelines. So 10 years and 20 years are benchmarks in the Maine statutes when it comes to divorce, and that's for making a determination whether or not to award spousal support. So when somebody comes to me and they've been together for quite some time, you start looking at how long they've been together because that matters of what the court may or may not have to do. Um, the difficulty, obviously, is it's an emotional process. The parties are living this emotional process, especially when one party might not want the divorce or they're surprised by the divorce. It can have a huge effect. Obviously, it takes a toll emotionally. It's divorce is usually ranked right up there, life events under death and things like that. So it's definitely has an impact. Uh, the difficulty becomes a judge now is being asked to make a determination as to what happens to how to dissolve this marriage, to dissolve the party's assets and kind of distribute it up. They don't know either party. They've never had discussions with them, and they're being asked to decide this case along with 100 plus other cases that year, whatever it might be. So the process is there to help the parties kind of untangle things, but it can be very difficult, because the longer the marriage goes on, you know, there's different scenarios, right? You have cases where somebody's the parties agree that one of the spouses will be a stay-at-home spouse and maybe raise a child while the other one works. When the other one's doing their part, both sides are doing their part, but when it comes to divorce, it seems very unequal
Yeah,
often.
right.
Somebody who's worked, contributed, put money towards their 401k, retirement, etc. Now they're being asked to kind of divide it up by the court. That mentally that becomes a struggle, saying, wait a second, I was the one working, the other party stayed home. The court looks at it and goes, well, that was maybe a discussion, or maybe that was an unspoken discussion that the parties had. As kind of arrangement is what they made regarding the finances. The same thing we see sometimes when people say, well, I didn't accumulate all that debt on the credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Parties, they come and go with credit cards in their relationships, sometimes turning a blind eye to things. And the courts often go, listen, parties do what they want with their finances when they're married, and now we're being forced to kind of untangle that. So those are kind of hard discussions and hard things to kind of come up with, in a divorce when they sit there and go, now I have to give up half of the retirement and I have to keep working. Well, that's what the court is there to decide and figure it out, because often it is going to be, and it's not always 50-50. The statute doesn't say 50-50 in Maine. It's, fair and equitable distribution, but it's almost
Interesting.
always. Now, if the other side has, again, if both parties have retirement accounts to be divided up, the court might try to do an evening out or whatever it might be. Um, but everything I've been talking about is in situations where the judge has to decide or the court has to decide. The parties are free to reach an agreement on their own. And whatever agreement they come up with, they can present it to the court, and the court is more likely than not going to enter that agreement as a divorce judgment. And the courts really do encourage that kind of discussions, because they don't know, like I said earlier, they don't know anybody in the case, and now they're being asked to decide how to divide up these assets and debts. So the more that the parties can control themselves, I think that can help make the process go smoother. You might have to have discussions directly with the other side, because often there's emotions and hurt involved. If you have that's probably a reason to have an attorney, is you can have the discussions with the other side if they have an attorney as well. But you can kind of work back and forth to reach an agreement, control the things that you guys can control, versus letting a judge decide, because when it does go to a judge, it's out of everybody's hands. Everybody in that courtroom now loses all control, and a judge is going to make those decisions, and then they're going to issue a judgment that one or both parties might not be happy with. And so the more that you can control in that situation, as emotional as it is, the more helpful, and I think the clearer that process going forward would be for the parties to kind of move on.